Bo-Katan wasn't old enough to lead.
Hell, she herself wasn't even old enough to lead. Her sister was younger. Her sister was moved to Sundari weeks earlier, and now Satine will leave her people behind as the capital collapsed under the pressure of war. The trip from Keldabi to Sundari was one of the quietest of her life. Satine made this trip dozens of times, many of them with her little sister, her father, and her mother in tow. Satine's mother died not long after the war started, and her father was claimed in battle like a true Mandalorian. As Satine's reflection looked back at her, the city of Keldabi got smaller and smaller. She didn't know it now, but it would be the last time she would ever see the city standing. In the months that followed her evacuation, Keldabi would become ashes, rubble surrounding the dead in a soft cocoon of lost history, culture, and lives. Satine's thoughts were far and few between. As a Duchess, she needed to lead. And what was she to do? Doom her people to repeat the same endless cycle of oblivion? The same one her forefathers had repeated over and over again. The challenge of rising up to the fight, only be put in their place by superior force? Be put in their place by their brothers and sisters? Surely they couldn't continue doing this. But a young Duchess didn't want to disappoint. She was surrounded by adults, all of which were used to serving her father, the former ruler of Mandalore. It had only been weeks since her father died, her dad, and she didn't have a moment to cry to herself. Always surrounded by an elite guard, always watched over carefully by eyes older and older. What a fate for royalty. She never pitied herself, but was this a life she was destined for? Satine was brought back to Sundari, so that she may repair the bond between Mandalorians. How could she do that, not even a woman yet, and in control over such a powerful society, one doomed to extinction? Satine waited until she was brought back into the royal houses of Sundari. She would call this home from now on. It surely wasn't Castle Kryze on Kalevala, but it was something, which is better than the fate left behind on Keldabi. Inside the royal palace, the young Duchess would make her decision. She would decide the fate of Mandalore. Before all this carnage, before the war, before her parents died, she dreamed of being the strongest of her family, the fate any and every Mandalorian wished for themselves. As a ruler, she wanted to have the strength of her mother, but the gentility of her father. Something her father instilled was a courage to be gentle, something her mother instilled was a bravery to be opposed. Such attributes for such a young woman. Satine had the dream of her life. She knew what her army would look like. She knew what she would become. But would that fate even be feasible anymore? To rise above her people and become the warrior leader they needed seemed like a fever dream at this point. And how she felt so terrible for her little sister. Poor little girl, abandoned by the death of her parents, and an older sister always whisked away for debriefings and strategies and meetings that would determine life or death for the Mandalorian people. When she received word that Keldabi had fallen, it was like Mandalore was lost, but truthfully, it was found. The oppressive regime had fallen, and while the war wasn't over yet, it was one step closer to a Mandalorian victory, which meant that the decisions Satine needed to make was one day closer to needing to be chosen. Her 15th birthday was spent alone, surrounded by adults, and deciding the future for her people. She kept going back and forth. The choice felt impossible. She was haunted by the passion of their parents, both of which were warriors, teaching their daughters everything they knew, taking both her and Bo to the Great Forge, just as any other Mandalorian world did for their subjects, shown off and paraded around as a future of their people. Satine knew that the fate of her people depended on whether or not her made warriors. Her birthday was quiet, and once all of her advisors left for either the final battlefronts or for sleep, she finally let the tears fall.